Leah. Thank you so much for being here today. I would love to start this conversation out with just the general question: what is your passion, and what spark drives you?
I have a lot of passion. So I love showing or helping people see that they're a work in progress. I come from, everybody has a story of their background. Mine is just as traumatic as anyone else's. And I can tell you, I'm going out on being 50. And when I was in school, I dropped out of high school. I didn't think, I would have never thought I'd be where I am. And it's because I had people along the way, and particularly a couple of teachers who made me feel like I was about to become something, right? It was never, I was a dropout, which eventually I went back to school and finished and went to college and all of those other things, but it was because those people kind of made me feel that way. And so at any point I could have been the person that you kind of ignore because they're begging for something. I could have been that person, but I wasn't, because somebody believed that I was just in the process of becoming. And that's my passion, is helping people see that.
I love that you say your passion is to show people that they are a work in progress. I have to be honest, one of my favorite things is to show people what they can be and what I see in them. So I think it's very similar to yours, because you're right. We all come from a traumatic background. We all are traumatized. It's just like I always tell my daughter, everybody struggles with mental health and mental health issues. If they tell you that they don't, they're lying. We all struggle with that, And so I love that you brought this back to teachers and people that inspired you in your life. I know that you have worked in the nonprofit industry for quite some time. How has this passion led to your success in your career, but also how has it led to you seeing people blossom and bloom?
Both internally and externally. So one of my favorite things is inspiring the team, right? And so organizations, specifically organizations where you help people, your first thing is really getting to know the human beings that are on the front line and doing the work, but also the leaders. We pay a lot of attention to making sure the people who are helping, our community have the skills they need or doing the job, and we're holding them accountable and but we're not investing in the leaders who are leading them. And then we're mad because, like, why aren't they doing better? Well, it's because you didn't invest in the leaders. You didn't hold the leaders accountable, right? All of those things. That it starts there. Our job is to coach you towards, because quite frankly, there's not a lot of difference between the people leading and the people working and the people who are in need. We're all just human beings, like, doing the best we can, right? And so I've seen people blossom that work here and other agencies. I was the kid in school, didn't stay very long, but I was the kid in school who knew the answer but never raised my hand, right? And I would mouth the answer. I was too nervous to say it, or I was afraid of being wrong, or whatever it is. And I see that in so many adults now, right? You're in board meetings, or you're in leadership meetings, and you see people who know the answer, but they're just afraid to say it, or they are afraid to be authentic, or they're afraid to be wrong. And so I want to inspire that, because I think there's a famous marketing person, Seth Godin, who is I read everything he does and watch everything he talks about. And he talks about nonprofits. You're supposed to be the scientists. You're supposed to be trying things, testing things. That's why people invest in you. And when they don't work, you try other things. That's the point, right? And you're not going to do that if you have staff who feel like they can't move without being right? I want you to try things. If we could figure out poverty, we'd have already solved it. We obviously don't know what to do. So I want you to have agency over your career and your life and your passion. And I want you to try things. And when they don't work, I want you to come to me, and I want you to be honest, and then we're going to try other stuff. And so some of the transformation I've seen internally has changed how we approach people externally, not seeing them as kind of clients who need our help, that is a community that is a part of the ecosystem that we're all responsible for. And at some point in our lives, we'll be in need, whether we want to or not. We will age and we will eventually be right where anybody else could be. And so one of the things that I've changed more recently is that I start by changing the team, because we have to be ready to help people in a very real way, and not in a kind of we're here to save you, because that's not real.
So you have said so much, and I want to unpack so much in that. But what stood out to me, and just full transparency, I was in leadership in nonprofits for several years, and I chose to leave because I didn't like how it was changing me. And I think you hit it on the head with, we don't coach leadership and we don't empower them and we don't teach them how to lead. And so you have all these staff who are inspired and, in my opinion, because they are working at the front lines, have a much better idea of what the solution is than leadership ever does. Absolutely. But as you said, we're trying to keep them in boxes rather than treat this like a science experiment, which I love that metaphor. So in my rambling, what I think I'm trying to say is, it sounds like you're almost advocating for a change in how nonprofits operate.
100%. Yeah. We are, it's just the scientist metaphor actually goes a long way for me, because it's also how we approach solutions, how we approach our mission, it's so easy. You can't treat this like a job. That it can't be, it has to be a calling. It's like, teaching, it's like nurses, it's like, what, you have to do this, right? Right. I remember I wanted to be a doctor. I mean, when I was a kid, prior to realizing you had to actually, go to school. I was like, I wanted to help people. And they said, unless you have to be a doctor, like in your bones, you have to be a doctor, don't do it.
Right.
Because the only people that should be doing that, who should be nurses, who should be teachers, are people who, I cannot make it a day if I'm not doing that. And that's, nonprofits shouldn't, this isn't like this should be the proving ground. This shouldn't be, right, like, come here because of whatever, I can get the job here. You're taking public money, and you're taking people's desire to change the world, and then you're taking community need. And you can't fiddle with that. That's a huge, you have to do this to be in this work. And the people who are on the front line, which I think is critically important to understand, is most of those people have needed in their lives, and they have a lived experience that makes them great at their work. Do they have the same education? Maybe not. Do they have the same right credentialing and all the others? Maybe not. I don't know. But I can tell you that and I don't mean in some weird hard knocks way. I mean, they actually know how to make things work, because they've shown that they know how to make it work. That now they're working here helping other people. And so really valuing that, paying for that, and then leading in a way that recognizes that the people who lived this job and the people who've lived it and gotten out of it or figured it out are as valuable as the people who studied it in the book. And we have to figure out how to learn how to lead people like that, because what we as nonprofits do is do it our way and no one gets hurt, right? Like, this is how we're going to feed you, and like, just do whatever, or this is how we're going to, instead of kind of bringing the community together around solutions.
I feel like you and I are long lost best friends, because there's so many things I've said in my life that you're echoing here. Like, we can't do things the same way that they've always been done. Right. And for me, nonprofit work has always been about that passion, about wanting to invest in others. And you have to be able to pivot and adapt. It's very flexible work. And that's what people don't understand. It's not like the corporate job. You don't go to work, you don't work 9 to 5, and you don't do the same thing every day. And that's a lot of that is what appealed to my personality, and why I love this work is because it's different every day and it's exciting and you get to try new things. But if you don't have the right leadership, you definitely kill that spark. And so how do you think we need to inspire leadership to change? Because there's so much with accountability, and then we always hear mismanagement of funds or see somebody on the paper, the news, right? So what is your suggestion in starting this change in leadership?
Mm-hmm. Well, I think it starts at the very top. And so, and it, I think leaders have to be an expert at leadership, and that's lost. That's not something that's cultivated. They'll take an inventory, like I'm a, INTJ or whatever. And then they'll say, well, this is just who I am. I'm ever changing. I mean, maybe my personality and I'm still an introvert or whatever, it doesn't change, but I'm ever changing. I'm ever learning. I'm constantly, becoming an expert at the thing I'm talking about. There's a lot of people who talk about stuff that they don't actually know anything about, or they like skim the thing. So that's one. Having a really difficult conversation, become an expert at that. Before you ever lead a human being, become an expert at having a difficult conversation with people, because all you're doing is kicking the can down the road if you don't. And it's going to be a snowball that by the time you actually have to have the conversation, it's going to be a disaster. And so I think that's a huge one. Recognizing that you're not right, like most of the time, and being wicked humble about it is key. Shutting up and listening to what people are saying instead of trying to, whatever, teach them, and whatever it is. And then take a coaching mindset instead of a parenting mindset. There's a lot of leaders they either want to parent, especially young people. I say young people, but there's a lot of people my age who are supporting or coaching a team of younger people. And, there's just like, I want to give them my learning and all this stuff instead of taking from them. The world changed, and what I know isn't as valuable as what you know. Right? I mean, it just is what it is. Like, I couldn't figure out how to get to the chat a minute ago. And so we have to treat our staff the same way that we should be treating our community and the people we serve as a part of a partnership, and not let me tell you how to do the thing that I've learned to do in my time. And this like top-down weird approach doesn't work. Right? There has to be a point where I say this is the way we're going, but also be really good at communicating about why we're going there and why it matters. And you can disagree and be right, but we're still doing it this way. And I've done the work, right? Not just like I like change, therefore I change things. But then listen and then bring people along and communicate with them and be transparent. Don't just say it's a value and then like ignore it, but be transparent. Tell people, show people that you can make mistakes. Show them that you do make mistakes. Be public with it. Like there's a lot of those types of things that I think make people better leaders, and they don't realize it because they're so busy trying to be buttoned up instead of just like, whatever, I made a mistake, and that is what humans do. And you know what I mean? And I also think anybody who's in leadership who says I hate change or I'm not good with change needs to not be in leadership.
Agreed. And I think what you are saying, I mean, I agree 100%. And what you're saying is so true. What I always say to leaders that I work with is the leader sets the tone. They set the energy of the building. And so if you come in with, like I always tell my team, failure is not failure. We can learn from that. So let's talk about it. What did we learn? Right? I don't have all the answers. That's why I hired you. And then the whole, it's okay to make a mistake. And I have found when I've hired people who have come from an environment where it's not okay to make a mistake, those are the hardest challenges of coaching them through it. Like, you're not a failure. It's okay. You learned, you grew. Let's talk about it, but let's not talk about it to shame you and humble you. Let's talk about it so we learn what to do better the next time. And yeah. I think that's what you're hitting on is we're not having the right conversations.
Well, we act like leadership and leading humans or just, nonprofit management, whatever it is that you're doing, exists in a vacuum that's independent of like real life. How many times have I gained and lost weight? Do you know what I mean? Like literally
Yes.
I read a book about it. And so we know how to succeed at it. We also know how to fail at it. And then
Mhm.
after we fail at it, we know how to succeed at it. And it right, like we know how to get out of the thing. So it's not like, well, now I've gained weight and that's it for the rest of my life. Um, with anything that we do, you're going to fail. You
Mhm.
just are. Get it out of the way.
Right.
And it's going to be embarrassing. It's just like a hard conversation. I will tell you that having difficult conversations with people and accepting difficult conversations from people is easily the hardest thing for anybody to do. It just either they come across like jerks or they fiddle around with it and don't actually want to have a hard conversation. And then it just makes everybody else around you miserable because you haven't told the person that they're doing a thing. And it helps no one, to include the person not saying anything. So being able to, I just strongly believe before you transform anything else, you got to get your house right. And it just, your house isn't right. It just, if your leaders are like just kind of, showing up and like not doing their thing, or if their team isn't, I want you to want the people that work for you to be the best.
Right.
Especially if we have a lot of, young social workers and, whatever. They're not going to, retire here. They're in their early 20s, whatever,
Right.
Or late 20s. They're not going to retire here. They're going to go on and they're going to work somewhere. And maybe they're going to be, doing therapy with kids. I want their experience here to be so transformational that by the time they get there, they're the best thing that ever happened to that kid. And that's not going to happen if we're just kind of fiddling around, not having difficult conversations. To make them the best, by the time they get to the thing where they're able to change the life of the kid that was in the same situation I was in, I want them to have learned so much from us that they are just so ready to be the person that kid was waiting on.
Yes, I'm sorry that I'm not adding more. You're brilliant, and you're saying the things that are in my heart and what's on my mind and what I try to communicate, and what I've tried to communicate through my career. So thank you for being brave enough to have this conversation and being bold enough to say these things, because it is needed. So let me ask you, in your current role, what has been your greatest challenge?
I'll talk externally first. So I spent most of my career in child abuse prevention. I was an abused child, a survivor of child abuse. And so I spent most of my career doing that. And it had been my passion my entire life. And I got to a point where I recognized that I needed to, for lack of a better way of saying it, we've got to go upstream from the issue, right? Because it didn't matter what I did. I was always waiting until something had happened to respond to it. Like, oh, well, then this happened. We'll change the way that we've done, this thing in the future. But that means that a kid has to be hurt first. And so how do you go upstream, to kill the thing that's, you know what I mean? To stop the thing from happening. And so when I took this role, recognizing the majority of the cases that I was seeing in my other life were cases that, the mom needed additional help, or she was stressed out, or she didn't have enough resources, or dad wasn't in the picture, whatever the thing was. It wasn't evil person did something to child. It was overstressed parent trying to, whatever, with no help. And if you have kids, we all know it's exceptionally hard and super easy to point fingers at people and say, how could you ever? But you've had a toddler having a nervous breakdown in a grocery store before and thought, I'm just going to keep walking and this kid is going to come with, or not. And
Right.
we've all done that. We just didn't. I just happen to have my mom that I could call and say, I don't know what I'm going to do. And she says,
Right.
do this, let him have his fit and he'll be fine. And you just keep looking at the, produce or whatever. And it worked. And she was right. And he's now 28 and has his own child. But not everybody has that. So how do I go upstream? So I go upstream and I start working in an organization that is focused on ending poverty in one of the most impoverished areas in one of the richest counties in the country. So I'm in Fairfax County, and the organization I run is on the Route 1 corridor, which is it's just a stretch of land that you can drive east from here and see the Capitol. So I mean, it's that close to the to the Capitol. It's DC, not the capital of Virginia. And it's incredibly impoverished, but you could, with a strong arm, throw a stone to some of the biggest houses you've ever seen along one of the most beautiful parkways. Okay, so that's kind of the setting of where we are. So the biggest challenge is changing the way people think about poverty. It is not very easy. It is easy to explain that child abuse is bad and shouldn't happen, and that we all have to come together to do something about it. It is not that easy for poverty, specifically in the population that we serve, right? Because it's a largely immigrant population, historically impoverished community, multi-generational families in poverty, and kind of how do you help people out of that situation who've been in it and have learned in it, right? Now very much a part of the community here. But no one came to this country to live on assistance. That's not, do you know what I mean? That's not who's walking in our door. There's nobody here. There's not one person who's come in. Knowing that most people don't even know what nonprofits do, there's not one client who's ever walked into our door and said, how do I sign up for benefits? Not one. They want a job. They're not sure how to go about it. They want to start their own business. They want to start, whatever. And it doesn't matter if it's selling fruit or I'm making something. Like they came here to build multi-generational wealth. They didn't come here to live off the system. And they're willing to work really, really hard for it. But that's not the story we want to know about people. We want to see, that they're not trying or whatever it is. And so, which I get, I actually do understand, because it's, you live in a world where that's the message and you've never really maybe experienced it, or you experienced it a little bit, but with whatever. And so I do understand. It feels like wait, let's just get a job. Like that seems super easy. Not that easy. And we know that. Especially if you're undereducated, or if you don't have daycare, or if you're actively struggling against other things, like the housing costs in Fairfax County, you have to be, I think in Fairfax County, the living wage for a family of four is $150,000 a year.
Oh my gosh.
Yeah. So just get a job, doesn't work here. And so, well, then move, which is usually the other solution. Just move out of that area. Oh, okay. Super easy. So that's not the federal poverty level. That's like to be able to live here and not like live on assistance. And it's $60,800 for one person. That's just to live here. And that's not to live a nice life. So anyway, all of that is to say, helping people understand that poverty looks very different. It's not the guy who's standing on the corner, something written on his, on a piece of paper. That's not it. That's not what we're talking about. We're talking about people who are working 2 and 3 jobs, right, but doing that, not happening to make $150,000 a year so that they can pay a $35,000 or $3,500 rent.
Right.
Which is a reality in this community. And for $2,500 in this community, you're living in a okay place. I mean, that's the reality of, living in Northern Virginia. Helping people understand that nobody got there by themselves, and that they're not going to get out of it by themselves. And and having compassion for people like that, even if they did. Okay, I did it to myself. I mean, I dropped out of school, dropped out of high school, and I can blame it on a million other people, but I didn't really try that hard, and I did all of those things. But then somebody helped me out, and I figured it out, and I went back to school, and I got my GED, and then I went to college, and I finished college, and then I decided, right? Like, yes, it's okay. I failed, and then I didn't.
Right.
And so believing, and that's what I mean, going back to the work in progress, believing that people who are in poverty are on their way to not being. And if you don't believe that, then they will never.
Right.
If you believe that they are this thing that needs to be taken care of, if you believe that, well, we don't want people like that to work in places like that, well, then they're not going to get jobs.
Right.
And then they're going to continue to be in the situation that they're in. So you can't just say, get a job and then not want them to be there. You have to believe that people are actually doing the best they can given where they are. And that maybe your help actually would get them out of the situation. Instead of pointing a finger and judging at them, how about walk over and shake their hand and figure out what the hell they need?
Exactly. And I think so much of it too. So I am the daughter of an immigrant. And so I grew up in a very interesting world, seeing both sides of that. And what I have come to learn is that when people come to this country, it's such a shock, such a different culture, that sometimes what is needed too is just simple education of like how to bank here, how to pay bills here, right? It's not just learning English. It's not just showing up somewhere and saying you have to speak English. It's a huge cultural change. It's a huge cultural shock. And we have to start somewhere. And it's just being kind sometimes, I think, like when I'm out and about and I hear somebody struggling with English, I'm always like, hey, if you speak Spanish and you're willing to speak slowly to me, I am willing to help you. I'll help you out if you just speak slowly. And usually that makes them laugh. And that I find laughter is the bridge to getting people,
definitely. Yeah.
It's creating that rapport. But it's seeing that it's not, the person is not the poverty or the problem. We are for not helping them get out because, and I think too, these communities form and it becomes this matter of survival. And it's almost like there's so much fear to leave that community because here I have a support system. Here I know what to expect. If I leave and go over here, I don't know what to expect. What's going to happen?
Which we all do this, right? Like how many of us
Right.
were afraid to leave home? If you've ever been in a relationship you wanted to get out of it, right? Anything. It's hard. It's hard because I know habit. I know what it feels like to be in this thing, even if it's bad. At least I know what it feels like and I know what to expect.
Exactly.
And so I can't leave this horrible job I have for a better job because at least I know the evil I know.
Right.
And so, plus you're asking me to bet on myself. So there's this other, and this is one of the reasons I say, like, for nonprofits, and I don't even just mean nonprofits, I think everybody who lives in a community has to do this. If you've ever had a job and taken another job, right? So at first you're like, got another job, gonna make more money, it's gonna be whatever. And then it gets closer to you ending your job, and then you're like, did I make a mistake? Do you know what I mean?
Yes.
Everybody does it.
Yes.
And then you get the new job, and then you're like, am I an idiot? Why did they hire me here? I don't know how to do any of this stuff, and I hate new people and whatever. And like for the first 6 months, you're like, I'm stupid, and I don't know why anybody would ever hire me. And then you're fine, and then it happens again. That same thing is happening at every level. And so it's like I've had this easy job, or not easy. In most cases, it's very difficult. But I've had this job. Yeah, it underpays me and everything else, but what if I can't do the next thing? You're asking people who no one bets on to bet on themselves. And they have a hell of a lot to lose if they're wrong. Right? Because they've got a family they're taking care of, they're sending money back, whatever it is that they're doing, they have a lot to lose. And so you're asking, I'd rather have 2 jobs, like this horrible job, than a new one that I might not be good at or I might not succeed at. You're asking people to bet on themselves when you aren't. When you're not even lifting them up. So, and I mean, I'm now well educated and in a position of power, and that's hard for me to do. And so, and that goes back to what we have to be building as society, as nonprofits, as leaders, as whatever it is, as human beings, is that we have to be willing, to humble ourselves, that we all are a work in progress. We're not, we're not setting the world on fire. Let's be clear. But that people just need somebody that believes in them.
Yep.
And for most people in poverty and most people in the world, they don't have anybody like that. They just don't.
Right.
And
Right.
and they have nobody to celebrate with.
Mm-hmm.
They're not doing right. They're just going to work and they're coming home and they're giving a paycheck to somebody and then they're going to work again. There's nobody doing those other things. And the answer, and to your point about challenge, is that people will say, "Well, no, I have nobody celebrating." Right? Well, that's also. I hate that for you. I don't want worse for him because you're living that. Right? When I was working in child protection, I did well. I got abused. Well, you know what I mean, and I'm fine. No, that's a horrible way of looking at the world.
Right.
That there has to my trauma has to mean something, has to count for something. So let me take one for the team, and then let's fix it for the next guy. Instead of this, let's all suffer together because I had to suffer. So that has been the biggest challenge. And for me also, is to change and really unearth my bias
Mm-hmm.
around and work and people and all of the things. You have to really confront yourself and be honest, not just externally, but internally.
And I think that's where this work starts, is that internal rewriting and how do you say it? Undoing the bias. I'm trying to think of how to say that.
Yeah.
But it is, and that's hard work because you have to be brutally honest, and nobody wants to be brutally honest with themselves.
No, because we all, right? Like, well, hell, I went to college. I did this. I had a hard life. But also, I had a different circumstance, and it wasn't as hard for me. And you know what I mean? And I actually was really good at school. I was just a terrible teenager. And like all of it, right? Like, but we're all coming at it differently. And just because I didn't have to have a difficult time doesn't mean that you do.
Exactly.
Why is it that we're trying to make everybody suffer as much as we did? Because that's not teaching anybody anything. And it's not helping, and it's costing us money as a society.
Exactly.
So why not just fix the problem? Anyway.
Yeah. I couldn't agree more. And I will tell you, the way I have approached it is I have openly shared my struggles with my daughter in hopes that she would learn from me, so she wouldn't have to experience those struggles, that she could maybe walk along with me and co-experience it so that her life is better. You know, and it sounds like this crazy science experiment, but it's working.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. I mean, I totally agree. I think I don't know why we want other people to suffer, because there is a point, there's a belief, and quite frankly, I don't know that I didn't believe this at some point, but there is an amount of suffering that is helpful, right? It doesn't hurt for you to go to sleep without enough to eat and you work harder. But what we now know is that the trauma of that is actually detrimental to brain development and a variety of other things, and makes you start to question yourself, right? Like, everybody should, have X happen to them so then they work harder, and that's not real. That's not real. In fact, you're injecting trauma into a life that didn't have it before for no reason. And then you're having to figure out why everybody has mental health issues and all of these other things. And now we've got to remedy the problem because we were so busy wanting you to have to suffer because I did. And people say too, right? So if you know anything about adverse childhood experiences, and kind of how that effectively changes your brain. We believe that that struggle makes things better. Right? We believe that when somebody struggles to get there, it makes them stronger in the end. And that's true for some people, right? Like fighting through college and finishing. That's real. That's a real thing. Struggling to put food on the table is not a real thing. That doesn't make you stronger at the end of it. It makes you feel like a horrible mother. That makes you feel like, why did God do this to me? Where is He in my life?
Right.
Because I go to church, I pray, I've done all the stuff, been a good mom. I did all the things. And right. So that struggle isn't helpful. In fact, it's harmful, not just to mom, but to the 4 kids that she's trying to feed who have no part in any of what's happening. And so when you suffer the mom, because you want her to have to, or the dad, want them to learn their lesson, you're building bad experiences for the family, and specifically the children.
So it almost sounds like as a country, we need a dose of compassion and a reality check, because you are so right. I think there are things worth struggling through, like a workout. I think you should struggle in a workout a little bit, right? And I think that in life, if you want to continue to grow, it's good to be uncomfortable because that keeps you growing, right? But you're so right about those basic needs and forcing people to struggle to meet those when we know that's just destroying our community, our country. So what piece of advice, how do we show compassion? Is it by modeling? Is it by saying things? Is it having difficult conversations? How do we change that narrative so that people understand not all struggle is good?
Mm-hmm. So I think we stop handing things to people, right? So this will sound a little bit like I'm talking out of the sense of my mouth, but I'm not. So my point about struggle is that when there are other people who are going to be collateral damage to the struggle that you want mom or dad to go through, that's not fair. Not fair for them. It's setting kids up for, right? Getting through a hard class without cheating, that's hard. Do it anyway. Studying a trade so that you can have a better life for your family is going to be hard, and it's going to be a struggle, and you're going to feel like an idiot. Do it anyway. There's a fine line between enabling and helping. And I don't mean either of those things in a bad way. But we have, for people to believe that they're a work in progress, for people to believe that there is something, that they can actually support their family. Nobody wants to just, I'm sure there are people, but by and large, people don't actually want to just live off the system and not work. They would love to have a career.
Right.
They just don't think that that's something that they can do. And maybe it isn't. In some cases, maybe it's not something that they're capable of doing. But let's say that, the families that we support, that's what they want. They want to have opportunities. They want to. So how do we change the thing? Is we give them opportunity. We surround them with barrier services or barrier breaker services, but we don't hand you food and right? Because and what's the quote from DC Central Kitchen where you can't feed people out of hunger? That's not you can't, right? There's not. You're going to be hungry the next day. It is what it is. And so I need to figure out who you are. What drives you? What's your passion? What do you want to be? Like, what do you want to work towards? Recognizing that the first goal isn't going to be, I want to be an attorney, or whatever, right? There's going to be, a long-term goal there. And then how are you going to get there? Like, what are the things that we need to do? And I'm not just talking about training, like soft skills. You can't have you can't dysregulate every time somebody gives you feedback, because you're not going to keep a job, or you're going to have to show up on time. And I know it's hard, and transportation is an issue, and blah, blah, blah. All of the things that keep you from being able to enjoy that success. How do we as society help with the focus on self-sufficiency, not the focus on doing things that feel good to me? It feels good to me to pack a bag of food and hand it to somebody. When I was younger, I don't do this anymore. It felt good to give, some person asking for money to buy food. It felt good to give them, a little bit of money. That felt good because that was about me. It wasn't actually about them. But those same people, right? Those same people, if actually had an opportunity, they're never going to choose that opportunity over a bunch of people handing them money. Because it'd be stupid to. Well, I don't have to work that hard because this guy's going to get money. So that's what I mean. The fine line between enabling bad behavior or easy behavior and saying, I believe more in you than you do right now. And that's okay. Let me take that load for a while. But I believe that we're going to have to, as a society, and that includes businesses, we're going to have to invest in people towards self-sufficiency and towards jobs and towards real employment that is sustainable for them at the level that they're at. And we're going to have to, we have to see things like, like daycare and after school programs and all of those things as critically important to now. And I don't mean this in a way because I've dedicated my life to children. Those are critically important programs to jobs.
Right.
I love that those programs also help kids. I want them to be safe. I want them to be nurturing. I want them to be developmentally appropriate and help kids stay in school. All of the things. Those are important to supplementally. But there is absolutely no way as a single mom, because I was single for a while, as a single mom, that I could have gone to college and gotten a job and supported my family without daycare and without an after school program. Hard stop. And it had to be affordable. And so we see those things as supplementals instead of critically important barrier removals for people who are trying to get jobs. Because if you don't do that, then 4-year-olds being taken care of by 8-year-old.
Right.
And then they came to my office in my past life. And then there's a whole bunch of other stuff that happens with neglect, etc. And so I think our focus has to be on self-sufficiency for the family, whatever that looks like, not continuing to need services in perpetuity, but how do we get people towards self-sufficiency? And what are the things they need to be surrounded with while getting there? And how do we adjust those things so that they're all focused on the same North Star, right? Which is parents being self-sufficient, which is kids seeing their parents work hard towards something, right? Their parents being able to grow and see the same thing that you're saying about your daughter walking alongside you. That's how you change kids, is that not my teacher showed me that I can, be an astronaut when I grow up. That's not, that's great. And I'm sure that at some point worked, but seeing mom work her butt off and go to college makes me want to do it.
Right.
Not somebody at school told me about a guy who went to college. That's not real. I'm going to, in the absence of learning, going to lean on habit, and my habit should be that mom worked hard for stuff. And so we have to, I believe, focus the whole universe on helping people become the thing they're a work in progress.
So thank you, first of all. I feel like I could speak to you all day. In respect of your time, what I would like to kind of summarize this with is, what would you say to someone who wants to work in service? And I don't mean service as in like hospitality service. I mean service as a nonprofit service. Mm-hmm. And that, what would be your best piece of advice?
I would say that this is a check-in that doesn't happen just at the beginning. This is a check-in. I don't know if it's every year, but every few. First of all, if you're going to do this, I want you to have to. Right? So and I mean this in a very real way. There are times where you'll work somewhere and you're like, I'm really passionate about the thing I'm doing, but then you're not. Do you know what I mean? Like, I care about it, and I hate that anybody has to struggle with it, but I actually don't. I never, going back to child protection, I don't want anybody who doesn't care about the thing. You've got to care about it. And I mean so much that you run into burning building vibes. Like, you got to have to do this, right? And then you need to keep having that conversation with yourself every few years. Because there will be a time, and that's okay. There's nothing wrong with that. There will be a time when compassion fatigue hits you, and you are no longer the person that they deserve. And that either means that you need to take a step back and do whatever it is. You need to go into something else. You need to retrain. You need to, whatever it is. but you cannot show up to this work, just like teachers, just like nurses, you can't show up to this work with apathy. And so that would be one. And two would be nonprofits have to run like businesses. To believe anything else is hilarious and it's not going to work. And so don't spend your entire education learning about how to help people. That will come naturally if you're supposed to be here. Spend your entire, everything that you have learning about business, learning about marketing, learning about how to talk, how to think differently, become an agent of change, not afraid of it, be willing to try things, all of those things. You have to, nonprofits cannot operate like government.
Correct. Yes.
They must operate like businesses and think about solutions. So you have to be thinking about the problem you're trying to solve and the cheapest and best way of getting there with the best result.
Right.
And do that with a human lens. I'm not saying to, do it weird. I'm just saying that if you will slowly, your point earlier, talking about people who are, who are passionate about this. What happens is someone comes out of college and they go, I want to help kids.
Right.
Whatever happened to me, I want to help kids. And then they say, well, I'm going to start a nonprofit and it's going to do whatever. And then the first thing that they have to do is ask people for money, which sucks. Learn how to do that. Every single person in a nonprofit has to know how to fundraise because it is what it is. Just know that you have to do that. I don't care if you're a social worker or the person running development, you have to know. Because that's the reality. We're all salespeople for the mission. So they're going to do that. They're going to want to start a business or start a nonprofit or work at one. And then the first thing they're going to do is they're going to have to raise enough money to get a building, to get supplies, to pay themselves, to have a staff, whatever. And pretty soon all of their passion for the thing that they were trying to do becomes operational.
Mm-hmm.
About keeping the lights on and And those are the people who are in leadership.
Yes.
And then they become operationally minded. How much more money we need, how do we keep the lights on, whatever. And they become so disconnected from the thing that made them passionate. And so the second part is to understand business and do it from the lens of a nonprofit so that you stay connected to the passion, because you lose that and then you become the problem to the front line. Mm-hmm.
Yes. Yes. I agree with everything that you just said. I hope you don't think that I am just agreeing with you to agree. I am truly agreeing with you because that is what is on my heart and what I say all the time. Mm-hmm. My daughter could tell you, she gets so tired of me saying nonprofits are businesses. You have to run them like a business, but you have to maintain that passion. And everybody has to understand that everything that you do in a nonprofit, and it could be as mundane as taking out the trash, is working towards achieving that mission and that vision, and that everybody contributes to it. It's a team effort. And I love that you said that it's a team effort to fundraise, because I think that would also change the perspective and take a lot of pressure off the development people and make it easier overall to fundraise as an organization.
Absolutely. We're running a business together. Right? It doesn't matter if this is a nonprofit, but like I started, I don't know, like let's all run a nail salon, right? Like, and a person walks in, I don't know if anybody who's ever been in a nail salon knows this. A person walks into a nail salon, the whole place is trying to figure out what you want. Do you know what I mean? It's not the one guy at the front. It's the whole place who's trying to get your business, because they all work there. At a nonprofit, and same with like going to Moe's or going to a restaurant, right? It's like, at a nonprofit, it's like, not my job. I don't do that. I'm not the receptionist. Do you know what I mean? Versus, we've been waiting on you. You know what I mean? We've been waiting for you to get here so we can help you transform your life. If you run like a business and then the whole nail salon is trying to get you to come in and do both a manicure and a pedicure, right? They're trying to get you to do more. Right. That's how you have to be, because people want to feel like they've been wanted here. Oh my gosh, I'm so glad. And so I'm over here doing my own job, and then I go home, and who cares? And that
which is
feel like that.
Yes, it's removing those silos. That's what it is. It's removing those silos and removing the territory and understanding if we work together, we achieve more.
Yeah. And that's been the first that was the first year, and will probably be every year of my career. At every nonprofit I've ever worked has been both the success or the barrier has been how well the team comes together to run to run the business, to do the thing. And to your point about humor or partnership or whatever those things are, whatever you have to do to make it so it's not miserable coming to work, because we've all had that job and don't want it. Let's all enjoy coming here. And my favorite people on earth happen to be in this building with me. And then do exceptionally hard, great work, but have a good time doing it.
Exactly.
Yeah. Yes. That's it. And so to answer your last question, my third thing is don't work anywhere that doesn't feel like that, because it will kill the spark so fast.
Exactly, because this is hard work, and you have to be with people who will lift you up, people who will do the silly dance with you because you had a celebration, a win, people who will remind you what your wins were on your really dark days so that you can keep moving forward. You have to be with those people every day to do this work.
So protective of your career if you decide to do this. Be so where you go. Ask a million questions about culture and about leadership and all of those things, because you're so busy trying to get the job that you don't realize that later on you're not going to A1 it, or it's going to kill your spark.
Exactly. And circling back to what you said about compassion fatigue, that is exactly where I was. And so I took a step back, and I am so thankful that I did, because it makes me appreciate the work more and want to work more now with nonprofits than when I had that compassion fatigue. And it's okay to get it. That was I had to learn. There's no shame in it.
Yeah.
Yes, it's 100% okay, and it's okay to own it, but then talk about it and in what you did to get out of it so that you come back stronger.
Yes. You have to, one of my favorite things, not my favorite things, but whatever, a really good way of thinking about it came from a training that I used to see a lot in child protection. You've got to put your oxygen mask on first.
Yes.
And that's such a, it's so easy to just especially when you're trying to help people, it's so easy to just, kind of be in this thing, and you don't realize that you're actually doing damage because you're not taking care of. And I don't mean taking care of yourself, and it's self-care. Oh my God, everybody and I don't mean that that's not important. And I love that people do that, but that's not what I'm talking about. I'm talking about recognizing when you're a part of the problem that's holding an agency back. And we will all get there. We just will. And that's the time. That's the time. And it may be my attitude. It may be my willingness to change. It might be that my own experience is whatever. It's the lens that I'm seeing the world through, whatever it is. It doesn't mean that you're that you're a bad person. It just means that for the time you're the wrong one. And that's okay.
Right. Well, Leah, thank you so much for your time today. Thank you for inspiring the world, inspiring me. I look forward to future conversations with you. And if there's ever anything I can do to support you, even just cheer you on, please don't hesitate to reach out. I would love to be a cheerleader for you and the work you do.
Thank you so much. All right. Take care.
All right. Thanks. Bye.
Bye.